the twin suns of Varelia, set in slow spirals, casting golden ripples across the spires of the alien capital. Everything shimmered: crystal towers, reflective bridges, even the air seemed to pulse with quiet grace. Among it all, Commander Jaxon. Rain stood still, tall in his matte black armor, the only human within miles of the royal palace. A decorated veteran from Earth's Peacefront Command, Jaxon had expected exile when assigned to Varelia. Instead, he'd become the only human, chosen to serve as a royal bodyguard. He was stationed outside the throne chamber when the announcement came. A soft chime pulsed from the crystalline wall behind him, followed by the high, melodic voice of the Queen's steward. "Commander Rain, His Radiance requests your presence." Inside the grand chamber, King Varel stood in his ornate silver robes, his translucent skin catching the ambient light like frost on glass. Beside him, the princess waited. Jaxon had seen her before, always, from a distance. Princess Serai of the Starborn line, youngest of 3 daughters, known across the system for her striking features and tragic fate. She was infertile, born without the crystalline genocode required for Varelian reproduction. A curse for a royal, an end to her line. Her golden gaze met his, steady and unreadable. "You've served our court with loyalty," the king began, voice low and resonant, "and, more importantly, with restraint. Most humans struggle to temper their instincts." Jaxon didn't respond. He knew better than to take that as praise. "We owe you a reward," the king continued. "But treasures fade. Titles mean little here. What we offer is more intimate." Jaxon's eyes flicked toward the princess. She stood still, but something in her shoulders told him she was bracing herself. "You will become her mate," Virel said plainly. The words landed with silence. "I don't understand," Jaxon said slowly. "You do," the king replied. "She cannot produce heirs. No political threat lies in this union. But she desires choice, and humans are known for their passion." Princess Serai stepped forward. Her voice was soft but controlled. "This was not forced. I chose this. I chose you." Jaxon couldn't read her. Not yet. But something stirred in his chest, a ripple beneath the armor. "I accept," he said, because something about the weight in her words demanded he say it. That night, in quarters carved from living crystal, Jaxon sat across from her. The silence was not awkward, was deliberate. They had nothing to prove, no audience to impress, only a strange future in front of them. "I'm not fragile," she said suddenly, brushing her hair back. "Everyone treats me like I'll break. I'm not asking for pity." "I didn't think you were," he said. "Then why are you looking at me like that?" "Because you scare me," he answered honestly. "Not the way you look, not your royalty. Just the fact that I don't know what I'm supposed to be to you yet." She smiled at that. "You'll learn." Later, in the dim light of the twin moons, she stood close, tracing the texture of his armor with elegant fingers. "Your people, you love so intensely, like you were built for it. We were bred to preserve bloodlines. You were born to burn." He looked into her eyes and saw something flickering, curiosity maybe, or hunger. And behind it all, a sadness, so old it made his heart ache. "I don't know what this is," he whispered, his hand brushing hers. "But I'll never lie to you about what I feel." The days passed quietly. No grand declarations. Just small gestures, a shared laugh. A moment too long spent watching each other. He learned how she hated protocol, but adored stargazing. She discovered his fascination with Varelian sculpture, and how he'd once dreamed of being a painter. They touched for the first time under the glow of the moon chamber. Not out of duty, not out of curiosity, but out of something warmer, messier, need. And somewhere in the silence that followed, something changed. She looked at him, startled, then lowered her hand to her stomach. "Jaxon," she whispered. Something feels different. Weeks later, the royal medics confirmed what should have been impossible. Princess Serai was pregnant. The court was thrown into silent chaos. Whispers filled the palace. Some called it a miracle, others a threat. But in their private room, she reached for Jaxon's hand and placed it over the soft curve of her stomach. "We were never supposed to be," she said softly, "but maybe that's exactly why we are." And as he looked at her, his alien princess, glowing with impossible life, Jaxon understood the truth. This wasn't a reward. It was the beginning of a revolution. The news spread across the Varelian system like wildfire. Princess Serai, the Baronair, the one whispered about, with pity, behind closed crystalline doors, was pregnant. And worse for the nobles locked in their frozen pride, her mate was human. Jaxon had grown used to being watched. But now, every glance carried weight. Fear, curiosity, resentment. The guards he'd once trained with offered nods with stiff jaws and wary eyes. The palace corridors, once a maze he patrolled with quiet duty, now felt hostile. Their walls echoing with half-heard conversations and hushed accusations. In the royal medica chamber, a healer hovered beside Serai, running scans through the light-bound crystal hovering above her belly. Jaxon sat nearby, armored fingers clenched in his lap, watching the flickering projection of their child, the swirl of Varelian energy laced with something unfamiliar. "How is she?" Jaxon asked. The healer, an elder named Selim, didn't meet his eyes. "Stable," he said, "but I cannot explain the readings. This is uncharted." Jaxon rose slowly, his gaze fixed on the projection. "Is the child healthy?" Selim hesitated. "By our standards, I do not know, but by yours, perhaps more than healthy." Later, in their private chambers, Serai lay curled against the pillows, her hand resting gently on her abdomen. Her skin shimmered faintly with soft violet pulses. "A sign of bonding," the medic said, "but only ever seen in successful unions between Varelians." "I dreamed of him," she murmured. "Or her. I couldn't tell. They stood in a field of stars and reached for me. Their eyes, golden like mine, but fierce, like yours." Jaxon sat beside her, brushing back her hair. "Your people won't accept this, Serai. They'll fight it. You know that." "I know." Her voice trembled, then steadied. "But I won't run." A summons arrived the next day. The High Council had convened, not for congratulations, but Judgment. Jaxon accompanied Serai into the Grand Conclave, the chamber alive with threads of light humming through the walls. Counselors in gleaming robes sat in crescent rows, their crystalline visages cold and sharp. The arch-speaker rose. This union was sanctioned under the assumption that it would be politically neutral. Princess Serai was declared genetically infertile by our highest medical authorities. The emergence of a child, especially one of mixed lineage, presents an unprecedented threat to succession. A murmur ran through the chamber. Serai stood straight, chin high. "If the council is afraid of what the child represents, then let us speak plainly. Are you afraid of evolution?" The room went still. The arch-speaker narrowed his eyes. "We are concerned with stability. Bloodlines maintain balance. This child may divide loyalties, or worse, embolden lesser houses to form unauthorized pairings with other species." Jaxon stepped forward. "With respect, you're not preserving stability. You're preserving fear. You declared her unfit to continue the line. You made her a symbol of failure. Now that she proves your science wrong, she becomes a threat." A younger counselor leaned forward. "Human," she said carefully, "you misunderstand. Varelian genetics are delicate, balanced. Introducing incompatible DNA could be catastrophic. But it isn't." Serai cut in. "I feel it. This child, it isn't breaking me. It's completing something that was missing. Maybe what you call balance has kept us stagnant. Outside, the sun dipped behind the palace, casting long shadows through the translucent dome. Inside, silence fell again, this time not from resistance, but uncertainty. Finally, the archspeaker spoke. There will be a formal review. Until then, the princess is to remain confined to royal grounds. The child will not be recognized in succession records until proven stable. Jaxon clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Back in their quarters, Serai stared out the arched window, her hand on the crystal pane. They think our child is a disease, she said, her voice quiet, a threat. But they don't see what I see. He or she's hope. Jaxon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. Then we protect that hope, no matter what. Serai turned to him, her gaze softer now. Do you believe this is fate, that we were meant to meet? I don't know about fate, he said, kissing her temple, but I know I'd choose you again, every time. Outside the window, ships moved like fireflies in the darkening sky. But within the palace, something far more powerful than warships was growing, an impossible air, and a future that no council could contain. A week after the council's verdict, the palace felt colder. Not in temperature, but in presence. Servants who once bowed with quiet grace now avoided eye contact. The laughter that used to echo in the halls was gone. Everything had shifted. Quiet judgment seeped through every wall of the crystalline fortress. Jaxon had grown up in war zones. He knew the signs of pressure building unseen, silent, but deadly. And this was the edge of something bigger. Serai had not left the palace grounds since the hearing. She walked slowly through the moon garden each morning, her emerald robes trailing behind her, one hand always resting lightly on her belly. The unborn child's life pulsed stronger each day, and with every kick, she felt the old world crumbling around her. They're watching me, she said to Jaxon one night, as they sat on their private balcony. Not just the guards, the nobles, the aides, even the Queen Mother. They're waiting for me to falter. They want fear, Jaxon said. But what they're getting is fire. Serai looked at him and smiled softly. You always say things that make me feel like I can burn down mountains. Maybe you can. The next morning, Serai received a message secretly delivered through a servant who slipped it beneath her door. The parchment shimmered with light code, an encrypted form of Varelian communication no longer used in the palace. It was old, rebellious, and dangerous. She opened it carefully, decoding it with knowledge she'd once buried. You are not alone. The bloodlines rot from within, but new roots grow. If your child lives, we have a future. Come to the Hall of Echoes at dusk. No guards, no signals. Serai stared at the note for a long time, then folded it slowly and turned to Jaxon. They've found us. Who? Those who want to change the empire. The ones who've been waiting for someone to prove that evolution isn't a threat, it's a gift. Jaxon didn't argue. He knew what she was suggesting before she even spoke it. You want to meet them? I need to. That evening, they dressed in cloaks to mask their identities and slipped from their quarters into the eastern halls. Jaxon had mapped the palace during his first year as a guard of corridor, every hidden passage. They moved in silence, avoiding checkpoints, using old maintenance tunnels carved into the crystal long ago and forgotten by most. The Hall of Echoes was an abandoned gathering chamber near the palace's foundation. Once used for ritual song and memory storage, it now stood hollow and dark, its crystal walls flickering faintly with ancient resonance. Inside, 3 figures waited. One was an older noblewoman, Serai, recognized her as Lady Tyr, thought to be in exile after denouncing the council years ago. Another was a Varelian man with mechanical limbs, his face marked by past punishment. The third, surprisingly, was human, a woman in engineer's garb, with sharp eyes and a datapad clutched in her fingers. We didn't think you'd come, Lady Tyr said softly. I didn't think anyone was left who believed like I did, Serai answered, We believed, said the human. We just didn't have proof, until now. They spoke for hours, voices hushed, but urgent. The child growing inside Serai wasn't just a miracle, it was a symbol. Proof that the two species could merge not just in trade or alliance, but in blood, in future. There are others, said the Varelian man, in hiding. Some with human mates, some with children, but they're afraid. If the council sees your child as legitimate, everything changes. Which is why they'll never allow it, Jaxon muttered. Then we make it impossible for them to deny it, Serai said. How? Asked Lady Tyr. Serai looked down at her belly, then back up with glowing golden eyes. We go public. You'll be branded a traitor, said the human. Then I'll be the first traitor who carried a new species into the stars, she replied. That night, as they slipped back into their quarters, Jaxon watched her with something close to awe. She was still the woman who had once stood across the throne room in silence. But now, she was more, not just a princess, not just a mother, a spark, and in a galaxy full of cold, inherited powers. She was about to set the entire system on fire. By morning, the plan was already in motion. Serai had summoned her mother first. Queen Valerie, once a famed orator and diplomat, had become a silent fixture in the palace since the fertility announcement. She stood tall as ever, her expression unreadable, crystalline robes clinging like liquid metal to her frame. You summoned me, she asked, eyes shifting between Serai and Jaxon. I want to speak before the public, Serai said plainly, officially, unfiltered. The queen's eyes narrowed. That would violate council protocol. Protocol didn't predict this child, Serai replied, resting a hand on her belly. Protocol didn't stop truth. The people deserve to see what your council is trying to hide. Valerie's lips pressed into a firm line. You'll be called a fraud, a heretic, your child a threat to royal blood. Serai stepped forward. Then let them look into his eyes and say that. Let them see the future for what it is. The queen hesitated. Her gaze lingered on her daughter longer than it ever had. You have your father's fire, she whispered at last, but this path will burn. Serai looked at Jaxon. Then we burn together. The royal broadcast chamber hadn't been used for a direct address in over a decade, but by mid-cycle, every screen, every crystal node in the capital lit up with the soft pulse of an urgent transmission. Crowds gathered in homes, in public squares, in marketplaces where vendors fell quiet and citizens stood shoulder to shoulder. When the feed activated, it was not the king's voice that greeted them, it was hers. Serai stood alone, bathed in pale white light, her belly unmistakably curved beneath her flowing robe. No guards, no throne, just a mother Varelian and unflinching. I was born into a legacy of bloodlines, she began, and for most of my life I believed I had failed that legacy. She let the silence breathe before continuing. I was told I was broken, that I would never carry a child, that no future could come from me. I accepted that, until I met someone who never saw me as broken. On the screen, Jaxon stepped forward beside her. I chose a mate, not out of tradition, Serai said, but out of trust, out of love. I chose someone from another world, another species. And from that choice, a new life began strong, healthy, and undeniable. There was no anger in her voice, only quiet defiance. You were told I was barren, but look at me. Now, she turned to the side slightly, letting the camera take in the full view of her form. The child moved just then, a ripple beneath the silk. This is not corruption, it is not dilution, it is evolution. Jaxon stepped forward and spoke in Varelian, flawlessly. I am not your enemy. I do not want your throne. I am not here to rewrite your history. I am here because I love your daughter, and together, we have created something that both our worlds need, unity. In a city made of silence, that broadcast became a sonic boom. By nightfall, protests sparked near the Capitol gates. Some shouted against the crown's lies. Others marched in support of the bloodlines. Factions formed too quickly, as if they'd been waiting for this moment all along, and high above it all. In the king's private chamber, Counselor Mavon stood with a clenched jaw. "She's destabilizing everything," he hissed. "The people believe her. Even some of our own bloodied houses are wavering." King Varel sat in silence, his hands clasped. His face was unmoved, but the slight tremble in his right hand betrayed the storm within. "She's carrying the first hybrid heir," Mavon added. "If the people rally behind that child, she won't make it to the throne," the king said quietly. Mavon leaned closer. "You mean to disown her?" "I mean to end the question," Varel said, publicly. The command was sent before sunrise. In the lower palace wing, Serai stirred in her sleep only, to be woken by the hiss of sealed doors, unlocking from outside. Jaxon was already awake, his armor powered on in seconds. The guards entered silently, but what they found, waiting for them, wasn't a defenseless princess. It was the beginning of war. The doors burst open with a screech of locking crystals, flooding Serai's private quarters with armored guards. Their movements were cold, professional silent executioners under orders, not from justice, but fear. But Jaxon Rain had been ready. His powered armor flared to life, with a deep hum, shielding Serai in a flash of rippling energy. He stood in front of her, a wall of black alloy and unbreakable will. "You want the princess?" he growled. "You'll have to go through me." The lead guard hesitated. "Commander Rain, stand down. This is a royal order. She is to be removed for safety." "Funny," Jaxon said, his voice sharp. "I don't recall treason looking this much like cowardice." Behind him, Serai rose to her feet, her emerald robe loose around her glowing form. Her eyes shimmered with defiance, no trace of fear. "Let them see what they came to destroy," she whispered. Jaxon didn't hold back. His armor surged forward, knocking the first soldier off his feet with a pulse of kinetic force. He moved with precision, not to kill, but to break their resolve. Shields clashed with crystal blades. Sparks danced across polished floors. One by one, the guards fell back, not from injury, but uncertainty. And then came the roar. Outside the palace, the city had erupted. Thousands gathered beneath the capital's great dome. Some wore the colors of the royal court. Others, many more, wore nothing but plain cloth and hope in their eyes. Serai's broadcast had reached them, and it had spread. Through alleyway data ports, smuggled crystal feeds, and word of mouth between starports, the people had chosen. Not the council, not the bloodlines, but the child, the symbol, the future. In the throne hall, King Virel stood alone. The nobles had not arrived. The council chambers were dark. The rebellion was no longer hidden. It was at his gates. Then the doors opened. Serai entered first, wrapped in royal green, her head held high, her belly rounded with impossible promise. Jaxon stood beside her, flanked by human officers and Varelian defectors, warriors who had once sworn loyalty to the throne, but now pledged it to truth. "You gave me to him," Serai said, as her father turned slowly to face her. "Not out of kindness, but convenience. You thought me broken, but I wasn't." The king's voice was low. "I was protecting the bloodlines." "No," she replied, her voice rising. "You were protecting control. But evolution doesn't wait for permission, and neither do I." Virel looked at her, and for the first time, something in his eyes cracked, not rage, not shamed at loss. Double quotes. "You stand here with a child that threatens centuries of tradition. I stand here with your grandchild," she corrected, "who threatens nothing but your fear." Behind them, the massive doors swung wider. The people had come, Varelians, humans, mixed couples. Children with glowing eyes and warm skin, silent and watching. Serai stepped closer to the throne, not to claim it but to offer it. This is not about conquest, not about rebellion. This is about truth. She turned to the gathered crowd. This child proves that we are not separate, not doomed to isolation. Humanity's gift was not strength, or fire, or even war. It was the ability to love beyond boundaries. And that gift, she placed her hand over her belly, is what will carry our people forward. Varel closed his eyes. Slowly, with shaking hands, he removed the royal circlet from his head. He stepped forward, and placed it not on his daughter, but in her hands. For the first time, he said, "Let the throne pass not through blood, but through choice." The chamber lit with light not artificial, not ceremonial, but real. A shimmering pulse spread across the crystal walls, activated not by machines, but by the presence of something new. The child within Serai had triggered a resonance no one had ever seen. A fusion of two legacies, singing in harmony. Later that night, in the high tower once reserved for rulers, Serai leaned on Jaxon's shoulder as their child shifted within her. "You changed my world," she whispered. "No," he said softly, brushing her cheek. "We changed it together." In the stars above, a new constellation blinked into existence, an ancient sign among Varelians, believed to appear only when an empire was about to begin again. And so it was. A human's love. An alien princess. An heir once thought impossible. Together. They didn't just rewrite history. They birthed the future.